Hi, my name is Wong Siu Lin.
Hello, my name is Anushka Dalmia.
Hi, my name is Lo Chun Xuan.
Hi everyone, this is Preeksha Malhotra.
Hi, my name is Suni Wei.
Hi, my name is Vincent Tan.
Hi, my name is Hashim Ahmed Hakim.
Okay, why did you apply for this opportunity and what were you expecting?
We were only a few months into the inception of Asian Dispatch, and when we found this, when we looked at the requirements online, we felt like we were perfectly positioned for something like this.
A bigger grant like the BMI is always very attractive to an independent media company like Macaranga because it's more money as well as extends for 1 year. And I had actually wanted to do something on wildlife crime for a while. And as we know, wildlife crime is one of the drivers of biodiversity loss. And this is what the grant covers.
So I think the idea was for us to find a project where we can build a more cross-border collaboration with our members. Our hope was that through this training combination with reporting, we can actually get a lot of their sensibilities on board and sort of in our early days bring that collaborative spirit that we were aiming for. How did you come up with your ideas?
I had previously run 2 workshops on wildlife crime for media and so was able to identify the gaps and challenges in media coverage of wildlife crime. At the same time, I was approached by 2 NGOs involved in wildlife trade. These are Traffic Southeast Asia as well as Justice for Wildlife Malaysia, and they identified the need to cover post-arrest issues in media coverage.
So this was sort of based on a previous reporting that Pallavi had done on Shahtush in her previous place, Vice. And it spoke about Shahtush trade and in a very small manner. But we realized that we can actually flesh it out further, and doing it in a very cross-border fashion would be something that's not been done ever before. But to connect the dots across countries, across the globe, to understand how this trade works is something really new. So we just wanted to bring that newness to the table. How did you execute the training and stories after receiving the project? I think it was mostly about sticking to the plan. When we applied for the project, there was a big scope of work we put in place and a lot of conversations with the team. My goal was at the end to just make sure that we stuck to what we had promised, which was to make sure that the trainings happened in the first part of the cycle of the project, and by the end of it we had the story out. It was sort of a grind to no doubt get it out. I knew for a fact that reporting, even trainings, because we were conducting trainings on a new curriculum. So, starting something from scratch can always be challenging, but the curveballs that came our way were absolutely unexpected. But then at the same time, so were the learnings. So it turned out to be a pretty fun journey in hindsight.
Well, I'd come out with a comprehensive plan, as was what was required of the grant. There are 3 components to it. The first is a workshop, the second is to produce stories, and the third was to create social media content. So I'd already had my partners in place, who were the media people, who were the NGO, Traffic Southeast Asia, as well as a youth group called Youth. And so it was a matter of putting it into place. This wouldn't have been smooth sailing.
What obstacles did you face during the training or story creation?
I'll name 2 challenges that I faced. One was in terms of the attending court. Because trials get changed all the time. The idea for that was to give exposure to journalists to attend trials of wildlife crime. And journalists had other jobs as well, so that was a bit of a challenge. The second challenge was working with youths in terms of them having very high ambitions to produce more challenging content to reach their peers, and that actually required more mentorship on my part.
For the training, I think it was about keeping people's attention. Oh my God, we were so worried that people are going to get bored during the training because virtual stuff really gives you the liberty of attracting audience from across regions, but then it also has its downfalls. And over here, the obstacle was to make sure that this 2-hour training is interesting enough for everyone.
This was a long, tedious, yet insightful journey.
What were some takeaways, learnings from your experience? Learnings would be that I think managing finances, whenever you're budgeting for something for another country, things can be very dynamic. What you need really changes by the hour, or let's say by the current scenario. And over the course of time, I think I realized reporting is dynamic. I was sure of it, but then it's really dynamic as a process.
Well, I wouldn't say it was tedious, but it was very insightful. It certainly upped my mentorship skills, and I learned just as much as the journalists did. I think one of the things that struck me was the scale of wildlife trade and crime, and I think it's more important than ever for journalists to give as much coverage from poaching right up to sentencing for wildlife crime.
How do you look back on
The stories, training, and the whole journey. It's been a very fulfilling experience. One thing I might do differently would be the court element, because it was challenging to bring journalists to trials. But trials are so imperative to make sure that you get the color as well as information you might not get from anywhere else. I certainly would do it again. It's really, really important that we cover wildlife crime.
It was a pretty interesting ride, I would say. We learned a lot. I learned a lot. There was so much to do to just execute this one story and training, something we otherwise as a newsroom, as a network, do every other day. But to have this particular theme at hand, something that was, I wouldn't say new, but something we probably haven't worked on as extensively, was very, very fulfilling.
What made you want to pursue this story?
Actually, pangolin trafficking is one of the highest wildlife trafficking in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. Usually, pangolin trafficking always linked with traditional Chinese medicine, so I decided to pursue this story.
Well, to be honest, I just wanted to go home because this is based in my home, Srinagar, and I always wanted to tell stories related to Kashmir. And this particular story, I had not done this kind of work before. So this investigative piece was something which interested me. And as a kid, I heard about this, craft. Like there is this particular shawl. It's very expensive, but I never knew what it was. So this story actually helped me understand it better.
We found that songbird trade in Malaysia is very rampant but underreported, so we decided to do this story by going to Kelantan, and then we visited many pet shops as well as the songbird contest.
How challenging was biodiversity/wildlife crimes?
There's a space to work in. Well, I believe whenever you're working on a story which is related to crime, it's very challenging. And especially regarding this story, this was a cross-border story, so it involved multiple regions. So it was very difficult to get people on camera to talk about, when they used to work with this craft. The people who agreed for interviews did not show up or dodged us. The fear of, talking about it was a big obstacle for us in the reporting.
For me, as a journalist who has covered wildlife crimes before, it is challenging because you're not only dealing with criminals and a lucrative underground business, but you're also dealing with a lot of data and, unfortunately, bureaucracy.
I found it quite challenging in terms of data collecting. I have to read a lot of research papers, journals, and also very complex of Wildlife Conservation Act.
How important is including data and trends in a story like this?
For me, it's very important because the number of arrests each year, the size of the penalties imposed show whether our government and our legal system is taking the issue of wildlife trafficking and the trade in illegal animal parts seriously or not.
Actually, I found this story from a court trial. I went to a court and then I found that many of the convicted in the court of songbird trade is from Kelantan. And then I have this thought that, is it a link between Kelantanese culture and songbird competition? That's how I started this story.
In any story, I believe that we have to include the context that data brings, especially when it comes to wildlife trafficking or biodiversity. The numbers are the story. The population of the chiru is the core of the story, is whether or not the chiru is endangered anymore, whether or not how ethical is the hunting of the chiru, all of that revolves around the data.
What do you think the readers would
Take away from this story.
I think the beauty of this story lies in the complexity and the contradictions of the two parts of our story. There's the chiru and there's the shehtush weaving. I think the fact that most stories in the climate change sphere, in the biodiversity sphere, have these kinds of local cultural complexity, and trying to understand that and trying to find your solutions within that complexity. I think that's what readers are likely to take away.
I think its wildlife crime is very complicated. It's not just policy, conservation, nature, but it's also related to people, culture, and their habit. In order to change the crime, we need to change the people culture as well.
I would like our readers to understand that our wildlife law is totally different than the other countries. And if they brought back any wildlife products from the other countries, it is not necessarily legal.